L'Inferno, translating literally to the Hell and released as Dante's Inferno in English, is an Italian occult horror film directed by Giuseppe De Laguaro, Francesco Bertolini, and Adolfo Padovan. Released in 1911, it's unclear who wrote the script, but we do know that it was adapted from the first canticle of the epic poem Divine Comedy by the Italian poet Dante Alighieri. Cinematography was done by Emilio Roncarolo, and it stars Salvatore Papa as Dante Alighieri, Arturo Pirovano as Virgilio, and Augusto Mila as Lucifer. At 1 hour and 11 minutes, it's silent, and I would classify it as being appropriate for ages 14 or 15 and up, due to violence and gore, torture, the portrayal and discussion of suicide, brief nudity, and some mildly sexual scenes. It also contains a quick but deeply offensive depiction of the Prophet Muhammad in hell, though I will not be showing that part here. The epic poem Divina Commedia, translating to Divine Comedy in English, was written by the Italian poet, philosopher, and politician Dante Alighieri between 1308 and 1321. It is one of the most famous epic poems ever produced in the Western world. With a reach so immense, its influence is basically unquantifiable, massively impacting everything from Christian interpretations of the afterlife to the establishment of the Tuscan dialect as the basis for standard Italian. Divine Comedy is divided into 3 parts, or canticles, titled Inferno, Purgatorio, and Paradiso, Hell, Purgatory, and Paradise, with each following a fictionalized version of Dante as he is guided by various figures through hell, purgatory, and heaven. It is also exceptionally long, exceeding 100,000 words, and explores the topics of the Catholic afterlife, divine justice, God's love, medieval Italian politics and corruption, and the nature of evil, sin, and free will. Inferno is perhaps most famous for introducing the concept of a hell with 9 circles, which is so ingrained in Western popular culture that many people mistakenly believe it to be an actual facet of Catholic doctrine, which it is not. As far as this film goes, its production was an enormous undertaking, necessitating 3 directors, roughly 150 actors, and 3 years of production. I've seen a few different estimations of how much it cost to produce, with the general consensus being that it was more than 100,000 lira, which is the equivalent of over $500,000 today, an unprecedented sum for filmmaking at the time. Films just were not huge ordeals like this. Most weren't even full-length narratives yet, save for a few rare exceptions, like 1906's The Story of the Kelly Gang. Equally unusual was that it came from Italy, a country that just was not contributing much to film yet. The industry was largely dominated by France, the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, and Denmark. And those 100,000 lira were not wasted, by the way. For starters, much of this film was shot on location, meaning it was filmed at real-world sites as opposed to on sound stages or sets. On-location filming involves a lot of moving parts, including travel and lodging costs, the transportation and storage of props, costumes, and equipment, and flexibility to allow for shooting delays caused by things like inclement weather. This would have been a wildly complex ordeal, and they were doing all of it without much precedent. They didn't have productions to mimic, or a lot of the specialized film professions that exist today, like location scouts or line producers. Another part of the cost came from the film's elaborate sets, costumes, props, and special effects, from large puppets and wirework to demon costumes and painted backgrounds. The amount of resources, time, and artistry that would have gone into the making of this film is staggering, especially when one considers that the filmmakers were emulating Gustave Doré's highly detailed wood engraving illustrations that were released in the 1857 reprint of Divine Comedy. Even post-production work for this movie would have been notably involved. So, were the blood, sweat, and tears worth it? The Inferno, Italy's first feature-length film, premiered in Naples in the Teatro Mercadante on March 10, 1911, accompanied by a live orchestra, which played music that has sadly since been lost. It left critics and audiences reeling. Nothing like this had been done before. It was quickly released in other countries as a result, and became a massive international hit, grossing more than $2 million at the time, equivalent to over almost $70 million today. It even triggered things like theater owners raising their ticket prices, and was played on and off in cinemas for years. And yet, despite its artistic achievement and financial success, despite the critical praise it received, with time, this film largely faded from public memory. In fact, it was only available in low-quality, incomplete segments until 2004, when the British Film Institute and American Library of Congress pooled their efforts and prints to produce a proper restoration. Since then, various restorations of Dante's Inferno have been released, with each one featuring its own unique soundtrack, everything from classical music to experimental techno. The poet Dante Alighieri finds himself lost in the wilderness, blocked from accessing the Hill of Salvation by 3 beasts. At the behest of Dante's love, Beatrice, the ancient poet Virgil arrives to aid him. The pair then wind their way through the 9 circles of hell, bearing witness to a vast array of sinners, from greedy politicians to duplicitous clergy, all facing eternal and oft poetic punishment. I am just enthralled by the fact that one of the first feature-length films ever made was a grandiose horror production. A wild amount of time, money, and manpower was put into this. Yet any struggles the filmmakers may have faced are not that evident on the screen. It truly feels like they made the exact movie they went out to make. And that in itself is a huge achievement, in my opinion. You can feel that the directors love Dante's work, even if they had to remove quite a bit for the sake of runtime. And in my opinion, this loyalty to the source material is both a benefit and a detriment. You see, when you remove Inferno's poetic language, a lot of the action is kind of just 2 guys walking. They stop to look upon sinners or even directly talk to them, but the main characters have no concrete goal beyond progressing, and they can't really influence the environment around them or drastically change. This works seamlessly in the poem, in my opinion, but in a silent film, it sometimes causes things to drag. This is compounded by the fact the filmmakers seem to have struggled a bit with editing down some scenes, leading to some parts wearing out their welcome. But that said, I don't want to imply this movie is boring overall, or that it's always too slow. As I said, its loyalty to its source is also a benefit. It captures Dante's hellish scenarios and agonized sinners so unbelievably well, bringing to life images that I found genuinely unsettling, especially for the era. Often, the lingering pace actually makes the disturbing imagery worse, forcing us to take in details and sit with horrors. When the pace doesn't work, it feels a bit sluggish, but when it does, it works. Now, as far as the characters go, like I said, they're not terribly complex and they don't really change. But the 2 leads are fine. Salvatore Papa still infuses some emotion into his performance while also looking pretty strikingly like the real Dante. Arturo Pirovano, by the nature of his role as Virgil, has almost nothing really to do beyond lead Dante around, but he still does it fine. In my opinion, the real flowers have to go to this film's numerous extras, who act with the kind of genuine gusto you only get when people know they're a part of something special. Be it writhing around as sinners or prancing as demons, they drive this entire film. But all of this, the writing, the acting, all of it, only truly works because of the technical craftsmanship that binds everything together. The work of cinematographer Emilio Roncarolo may not be groundbreaking by today's standards, but I'll be damned if that man didn't know how to frame a scene. And the rest of the crew, though unnamed, did even more. One of the biggest draws of this movie for me comes in the form of its technical achievements. The hellscapes feel strange and sprawling, and the costumes. On screen, we get everything from medieval nobles to ancient philosophers, to harpies, demons, and Satan himself. They're not all the most expensive outfits, but there's something equal parts charming and impressive about the fact that each one is custom made and feels tailored for every scene. And of course, I could not forget to mention this movie's practical and special effects. All of it executed with so much creativity and care to yield some of the most striking imagery in this era of film. Bertrand de Born carrying his own head, the lustful being blown about on the wind, and Satan just devouring people. These images blew people's minds over 100 years ago, and they still leave an impression today. Now, before I wrap this up, I do want to mention this film has several available soundtracks to accompany it. The one I prefer is by the German electro group Tangerine Dream. It's this deeply weird, discordant affair that really enhances the film's unreality and sense of dread. It's hard to explain in full why it works so well. It's just sort of one of those things you need to hear to understand. Overall, I am going to give The Inferno a 4 out of 5. Its biggest detriment are its slow pacing and sparse plot, as well as some morally archaic Catholic messaging that may put some people off. But as a showcase for technical artistry and as a weird, surreal experience that you just sort of have to let happen to you, it is memorable and wonderfully made. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, a like and subscribe would be very appreciated. You can find my other reviews on this channel, starting all the way back with my review of the first horror film ever made in 1896. You can also follow me on Blue Sky, Letterboxd, and Instagram at Under the Fleapit. If you like what I do and want to support the channel, my Ko-fi donation page and Patreon will both be linked in the description of this video. Until next time, this has been Under the Fleapit. Stay spooky!